Hello everyone, I'm Prakash from Solve IT Consultancy, and in this video we're going to talk about privacy, compliance and data protection standards in Azure. So what I'm going to answer, or rather what I'm going to discuss in this video is really about these questions that my customers and my students alike have for me, like is my data on Azure secure? If I keep customers' data, if I'm providing services to customers and I'm keeping them within the boundaries of my data centers, so I have complete control, over the way the data is, and customers will then also have confidence in the way I'm managing my data for them. If it's my own internal data as an industry and I'm keeping it within my data center, then because I have physical access and physical control to all of this data within my data center, then I also have confidence. But when I bring this data out to a public cloud provider, then I lose that control, right? So I lose that visibility as well. So I have no idea whether or not my data or my customers' data is being managed the way it should be managed. So this presentation hopes to alleviate some of your concerns and also to share with you what Microsoft is doing in ensuring that your data is in fact in compliance with some of those industry specific regulations and so on. So let's start by looking at Microsoft's privacy statement. So you can access this by going to microsoft.com/privacy statement, where Microsoft describes how they handle your data, right? Because typically as a customer, if I'm bringing my data into the cloud, my question would be, okay, so as an example, my organization is in Malaysia. The closest Microsoft data center to us is Southeast Asia, the region Southeast Asia, which is in Singapore, right? So if I then place my organizational data in the Southeast Asia region, do I own the data? Or does Microsoft own the data, or does the Singapore government own the data, right? So that's a typical question that I get from my students and customers. So the statement kind of explains, which data Microsoft processes, how they process it, and for what purposes, right? So let's take a look at the privacy statement. And this is the Microsoft privacy statement. So, you get very good information, on some of those topics I mentioned earlier, right? The kind of data that they collect, how we use the data, and so on. So remember that when you sign up for the service, right? So it is provided in that fine print, right? What kind of data are you providing to Microsoft? And this is where you get more details as well. How does Microsoft use this data? So they are very specific about the fact that they don't share the data with anybody else unless you explicitly allow them to, right? Even when you let's say, for example, if you have data that you upload into OneDrive, right, and you provide the link to that document to an external email address, right? So that is where you authorize Microsoft to share your personal data with someone out of Microsoft and out of your organization, right? And that's when Microsoft provides that link, right, to the external party, right? So again, whenever your data is going to be shared out of the organization, you have to provide that right and provide that permission. Otherwise, the data doesn't leave that security boundary of the Microsoft data center or the controls that you have then placed, right? So this is just me talking, but it's important for you to read through each of these links that is being provided to really understand the way your data is going to be managed. So again, work with your legal team, with your compliance team and so on, to understand really how the data is being managed before you decide whether you want to move to the cloud or not, right? So that's one perspective, the privacy statement, right? The next perspective that we have is the Microsoft Trust Center. Now, what the Microsoft Trust Center does is that it provides in-depth information about the way Microsoft has architected its infrastructure to provide so that you trust the infrastructure that is being provided. So they have recommended resources arranged by topics, security guidance, trust guidance based on industries, and very specific information, whether you're a business manager, whether you yourself are a risk assessor, a privacy officer, IT administrators, right? There's information for all parties alike. So if I go into the microsoft.com/trust center site, Right, so this is really what it is. So, you get access to security perspectives, privacy perspectives, compliance perspectives, and industry relevant breakdowns as well as tools that you can use to kind of score and evaluate your own presence in Azure. Right, so again, go through this site. There's a lot of information for you as well. You'll be able to get information pertaining to compliance offerings and so on. So in my example that I'm going to share with you in a bit, when we start looking at compliance, we'll look at PCI DSS as an example and run through some of those PCI DSS controls as well, right? But this is really the Trust Center that I believe that you should read. There are a couple of videos, a lot of documentation, go through them so that you get a better understanding on the way, security, privacy, compliance, and policies are implemented across Microsoft's cloud products. And then that allows you to then make an educated decision in moving to the cloud. Okay. Now there's also a companion site, servicetrust.microsoft.com, that hosts a lot of compliance related publications about Microsoft's cloud services. So this is where we get access to audit reports, right? When Microsoft says that they are in compliance with industry specific regulation, it is not just Microsoft saying it, it's not a self-declaration. There are independent security assessors that are auditing Microsoft's environment, and they are providing the reports for us to then access to understand that Microsoft is in fact in compliance, right? So there are also guidance for us as a customer, so that we understand what are the services that we can use. And there's also a perspective that shares where our responsibility lies and where Microsoft's responsibility lies. Now, it's very important in compliance, right, to understand that when we talk about a public cloud like Microsoft, Amazon, and so on, security is shared responsibility. That means there are certain aspects that Microsoft is responsible for. There are certain aspects that we as a customer are responsible for. I'll talk about this in more detail later on when we talk about the PCI DSS compliance offering, right, as an example. So let's go into the servicetrust.microsoft.com site, right? And this is, like I said, is where we are able to access the audit reports, all the independent audit reports now on Microsoft's cloud services. There are a lot of security assessment documentation that we can also download if you want to perform a self-assessment as well. In a related video, I'll also talk about Azure Blueprints, which is really cool, right? It allows you, well, as what the name suggests, blueprints, it allows you to create a template that consists of artifacts, objects, security policies, Azure policies, and so on, that we can implement, that we can use repeatedly, right? So if I want to kind of set up a test and dev environment, or I want to set up a production environment, right? I will then be able to apply the blueprint, and once the environment has been deployed, it will then be in compliance with all the security practices which has been defined within the blueprint. So it allows me to recreate an environment over and over again that is in compliance with my requirements. So me as a vendor, when I work with customers, right, it will be very beneficial for me to create, a blueprint that I can then deploy to customers over and over again, repeat the same deploy over and over again. And each time I deploy it, it is in compliance with some of the regulatory controls that the blueprints are addressing, right? So that's pretty cool. But we'll talk about blueprints in a separate discussion altogether, right? So over here we have compliance reports, white papers to help guide you as a customer as well, and a lot of other content, technical support from Microsoft, FAQs, and guidance to get started on the cloud, right? So again, please go through the Service Trust portal, because that really kind of helps you to evaluate now whether or not the cloud is suitable for you, right? And this is an example of one of those audit reports that you can get from the Service Trust portal. And as you can see, I have Azure PCI DSS. So this is one of the latest reports that covers Azure Public. So if you download this, you'll be able to see the security report pertaining to Azure Public. Right? So that's one of it. I'll come back to this later on when we talk about compliance, right? So what is compliance? Compliance is when there is a regulatory body that lists a specific set of controls, right? So if you comply with the controls in the sense that you have implemented a solution and all the control requirements are being addressed by your solution, that means that you are in compliant, right? Then what you next need to do is to contact, these regulators, and then get them to assess your environment and then receive the certification to say that you are in fact in compliant, right? So I'm going to go to the Microsoft Compliance Center to kind of show you some of the compliance offerings that we have, right? So these are the compliance offerings. So Microsoft offers one of the most comprehensive set of compliance offerings, right? And when we talk about these offerings, right, Microsoft complies to these regulators, but that doesn't mean that you, as a customer, as an Azure customer, automatically inherit these compliance certifications. We'll talk about that in a bit, but amongst all of these compliance offerings, right, we also have industry level offerings, and I'm going to use PCI DSS as the example of my discussion. Now, what is PCI DSS? PCI DSS is the payment card industry data security standard. So if you have a solution and you are collecting customers' credit card data and you're storing the data, you're using the data, then you should be subject to PCI DSS certification, right? So therefore, if you're an e-commerce provider, now you have an e-commerce solution running on Azure, you should, and they're collecting customers' credit card data, then you should also complete an annual PCI DSS assessment, getting yourself qualified, right? So once you tell the customer, hey, I'm PCI DSS certified and qualified, then the customer has more trust in providing their credit card data to your e-commerce site, right? So that's really what it is all about, right? So it kind of gives you bragging rights, right? So if you read through, right, what is how does Microsoft achieve this compliance and so on, it gives you a better understanding of it. So I'm just going to browse through some of this information, right? So it says that Microsoft, completes annual PCI DSS assessments, and they have received, the highest level of certification, level 1, because the volume of transactions is really quite high, and level 1 requires an on-site assessor to assess Microsoft's environment, and there will be an attestation of compliance and certification that Microsoft receives for a 1-year period, and that certificate is then available for us to download and to verify and to understand that Microsoft has achieved this certification, right? So, and it's important, like I said earlier, right, to understand that although Microsoft has PCI DSS compliance for Azure, OneDrive for Business, and SharePoint Online, it does not automatically translate to PCI DSS certification for services that customers build. So if I build a solution that uses OneDrive to store data, that uses some of the Azure services, it doesn't mean that I automatically receive this certification as well. So that's very important to understand, right? So there's a lot of guidance here to get you started, a lot of FAQs as well. But I want to focus on 2 links that I have here. One is the PCI DSS quick reference guide. You can download this guide, read through it to understand what are the PCI DSS controls required for you to get certified, right? So I'm not going to run through all of this with you, but like I said, you can download this guidance and then try to understand exactly what that is. But what I want to showcase to you is the Azure PCI DSS responsibility matrix, right? Now I have this matrix, it's an Excel file. Now what this does is really to share with you where your responsibility lies and where Microsoft's responsibility lies, right? Now, as an example, let's say that you're building a solution on Azure and your solution is going to be placed within an Azure virtual network, right? Now, Microsoft, as a cloud provider, they have received certification from PCI DSS, and PCI DSS has evaluated the way Microsoft implements a virtual network. Now, just a quick background, right? What is an Azure virtual network? So when you implement an IaaS, infrastructure as a service solution, for example, a virtual machine, right? That machine needs to be connected to a virtual network. So that virtual network is a logical network construct, right? So you as a customer, when you have multiple resources within a virtual network, that virtual network is isolated from other customers on Azure. Now, how Microsoft implements that virtual network is by using software-defined networking at their data center level, right? So what PCI DSS would have done is to audit Microsoft's physical infrastructure, then to certify that yes, each virtual network that a customer creates is in fact isolated from other customers, making that virtual network a secure boundary for a customer's presence on Azure, right? So that's really what the Azure virtual network is. Now, but when you implement a solution like a virtual machine or web service and place it within your virtual network, and you then open up ports and expose the ports to the internet, allowing unauthorized access to services, right? Then you are not implementing security effectively, right? So therefore, the way you implement security, like implementing firewalls, network security groups, access control lists to secure your solution, is independent from the controls that Microsoft has implemented in ensuring that their infrastructure is secure. So if you do not implement the proper controls within your solution, then therefore you become a security problem for yourself, right? So when PCI DSS audits your solution, you may not be in compliance with some of the security controls that they expect you to implement. You get what I'm saying? Which is why we say that just because Microsoft has achieved compliance, it doesn't automatically trickle down to you to say that, hey, I inherit just because Microsoft has it. It doesn't quite work that way, right? So this document, it highlights the responsibility metrics. What is Microsoft responsible for? What is the customer responsible for? As you can see, all the requirements are quite well implemented, and this is one where they focus on a secure network, right? And then they talk about firewalls and router configurations and so on, right? As you can see, some of these controls are shared in their responsibility, right? So when it's shared responsibility, what is Microsoft responsible for? And you as a customer, what are you responsible for? Right? So it's important for you to understand all of those controls. So if you can then go through all of these requirements and implement your solution in compliance with these requirements, and so that if there are any customer responsibility and that you comply with those customer responsibilities, right? Then when you then call upon the security assessor to assess you, then you are probably going to qualify and going to get certified and going to kind of like comply to this regulation, if you get what I'm saying. And that's really what it is. Okay, now to help support your configuration to ensure that you are in fact compliant, Microsoft also provides regulatory compliance support within the Azure Security Center. So this allows you to track and verify your compliance in the way you have implemented your solution, right? So how does that look? If you get into the Azure portal, if you access the Azure Security Center, you have the regulatory compliance section. So out of the box, Microsoft has already added the PCI DSS standard. And as you can see, out of the 31 controls, which has been defined, I only passed 4 of them, right? And these are all the controls which are provided to you. So if you expand each of those controls, and then you start making sure that you implement, these controls within your solution, and then, the regulatory standard compliance status would say that yes, you pass all the 31 controls, right? So once you pass the control, this is a self-assessment and also a Microsoft supported assessment. Then you need to call upon the regulators to come and then assess your environment, and then to provide you the certification to say that, hey, you have achieved compliance, right? And that's really what the security center is for. So like I said, these are some of the out-of-the-box standards that Microsoft has given you, but of course you can then go into your subscription and add some of the other standards that you want to comply with as well. and eventually get the compliance assessment report within regulatory compliance. Right, so there's a lot of support, in ensuring that you can implement a solution on Azure within, the kind of accepted compliance regulatory controls, right? So to summarize this discussion, use the Microsoft Trust Center is quite helpful. There's a lot of reading involved, right, to kind of understand where your responsibility as a customer lies and where Microsoft's responsibility as a service provider lies. Okay, so use the information wisely, and that takes us to the end of this presentation. As usual, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section below, and thank you for watching.